This is AgGrad Live.
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
The show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry.
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day. AgGrad Nation, we are live, back for another episode of AgGrad Live. This has been a lot of fun to show up live and just be here on Facebook and kind of have an open office hour for anyone who wants to stop in and watch live. And for those of you who can't, you can also catch us afterwards, either here on Facebook or by subscribing to the AgGrad Live podcast or to AgGrad on YouTube. So hopefully the best way, the ideal way to watch this is right here live, because you can ask questions in the comments and be part of the conversation. But if time doesn't allow, make sure you are subscribed both to AgGrad Live on the podcast and to YouTube. We have a very special treat of a guest here today. This is somebody who you may or may not know has been around with AgGrad from the beginning. She has either started or helped grow a lot of the programs that AgGrad now offers on social media platforms and a lot of the content on the website. She is someone who has been in the marketing space and the digital marketing space for quite some time and has a lot of expert career advice to share. So she's probably going to be mad at me for building her up too much, but this is going to be very, very helpful, especially for those of you who think you might at some point ever want to search for another job. So I'm going to bring her on. Here is Hannah Miller. Hannah, thank you for being on the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. You kind of built me up there.
Well, I can't believe this is the first time that we have had you on AgGrad Live.
I know. I think that we're both so busy all the time. So it's changed. Things have changed a lot in the last 3-5 years. Well, there's a lot going on.
There is. Well, let's talk about that before we dive too much into the job search advice. Tell us about you. What's going on in your world? What you do for Barefoot Proximity, and kind of what's going on with Hannah Miller.
So yeah, I'm a senior strategic planner for Barefoot Proximity, working with some global ag brands. And basically, so Barefoot is actually like a non-ag company, and I am either you call me the expert in ag, which that's a hefty title. There's a lot of Googling involved. And sometimes the team just calls me the unicorn. So I'm kind of their go-to person, that I make sure that all of our content that we're creating back up to the end user. So in my case, that's growers. So, or farmers, I guess, however you want to call them. And so I just ladder that back up. I make sure that we're putting the right crops in the right field. And then I'm developing strategies based on how growers live their lives and when they're doing things and how they're making decisions. So, yeah.
Very cool. And so before you had this role as what I'll call the ag expert for Barefoot Proximity, I know you have had other roles, which both working for agencies and also in business for yourself. So in the past, when you've had to search for a job or been in a position where you were open to searching for a job, tell us a little bit about your experiences, and then I want to transition to kind of what advice you can draw from that for others.
Man, I think job searching it's the worst. It is a painful experience. At least for me, it has been and a lot of the I hate saying kids, a lot of my friends and peers or people who look up to me and ask me for advice, they are going through the same stinking things I went through. It's hard to go through and apply these online forms, and you just submitted your resume and then you have to basically fill everything out again. It's not a great experience. I think back to one of the first jobs I had. It started as an internship, and the person who was in HR then, I followed up with her 5 times before I heard back from her. 5 times. And I got the internship. I was their chosen one for the internship, but that's how many times it took me to email her or call I think I emailed her twice and called her twice.
Okay, hold on. I got to step in here. So what kept you thinking that you still had a glimmer of hope after 3 times of following up and not hearing anything back?
I think it was, they had kind of left it where she basically said she basically alluded to the fact that I was getting it. But then I never heard any confirmation details or any kind of offer. So I was like, okay, so do I have it or do I not have it? So that's why in a normal case, I would not follow up that many times. I mean, I would say I'm not against following up to 3 times, especially if 2 of them are email and one's a call, or vice versa. You have 2 calls and one email. Like, I don't think that that's overboard at all with HR, because you have to think they're overloaded with whoever they're trying to get for the different positions. And at the time, they could be hiring for 10 positions for all you know, on top of everyone a lot of people in HR also dealing with internal issues. So, whether that's personnel issues or accounting issues or whatever, they have a lot on their plate. And I think that a lot of HR people are people like person people, not always, at least the ones I've met that are, they're always friendly, they're always nice, but they might not always be the best planners or organizers. So I think solid follow-up is always fair, but that's why I followed up with her so many times. And then eventually I got the, yes, it's happening, and yes, we'd like you here, and here are the details. So, but it wasn't a fun feeling.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. And follow-up is definitely something that we always try to harp on whenever we're writing blog posts or anything about job search, because I think you're right. I do think there's a lot of moving parts, especially if you're looking at a company. A mid-sized company may have a couple people in HR that are doing benefits, promotions, disciplinary action, maybe, office culture, office events, and recruiting, and probably recruiting for several roles. So I think that's a really, really important component. What about other times you have been in transition? How have you kind of found the jobs, and are there any sort of patterns you've seen that of tactics or strategies that really worked for you?
Yeah, so before the gig I have now, I kind of worked for myself. Let me phrase that. I didn't kind of work for myself. I did work for myself. And so a lot of those opportunities came from me reaching out, which is very different, I think, than like your traditional job search, because you're pitching a product or you're pitching a service. And so a lot of that came from just, I guess, emailing people. When we started working together, I think I had asked you, like, hey, I'm kind of in the market, and then you needed a little bit of help. And so I was like, hey, there's an opportunity here. And we jumped on a call, and then we put something together. I can't tell you how many of my side gigs have happened like that. Like, I hear someone needs some help, or a friend of a friend is like, hey, this person needs some social media help. And I literally just hop on a call for 30 minutes, an hour, shoot, sometimes 2 hours. And I put together, I'm not scared anymore to just put something together on paper, add a price to it, and send it off. And I've had lots of people, especially when it came to like website design and stuff, because I worked with a lot of smaller brands at first, or smaller individuals, who couldn't invest $1,500 to $2,500 in a website. Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, oh, that's just not in our budget now. And like, at first I'd be like, oh man, like that hurts. But I've had more people say, oh, this is like, that's what you charge? Like, this is great. And it's been a really great experience. So in those situations, I've reached out. Now, it's a little weird how I got my last job, I guess. Not weird. Recruiter found me on LinkedIn. So, I stay pretty active on social media and LinkedIn, and I have a website. And she reached out, and it was a little funny because she asked me, she kind of gave me the pitch about the job and said, well, if you know anybody who fits this description, I'll pay you $1,000 if I actually, like, if you'll pitch some people to me. So I reached out to my group of friends and was like, hey, is anyone looking for a position? It can be remote. And I actually sent her 3 of my friends' resumes. And she got back, like, I didn't really expect anything to ever come of it. I did have one friend that was like really hard looking for the job search, but was fresh out of school. So I didn't think that they were going to be a fit. She needed some experience, but she got back to me and said, well, did you not want to apply? And I was like, well, you didn't ask me to apply. People. I was like, how about you and I hop on a call and you can talk to me a little bit more about it, and then I'll decide if I want to apply. So we did that, and I was like, man, what could it hurt? Like, I was working for myself. The job was remote. I just lost one of my big contracts because they had lost the client. Because I was like contracting through an agency, and they had lost like this huge client that I worked on. So I had a lot of free time. And I was like, if worst case scenario, I get a job, I can still keep my side clients, my current clients. And, you know, that in itself was an experience because I worked through that recruiter, and then they set up an interview where I interviewed with my now boss. And then I had a video interview with four or five other team members. And it was really funny because they were all male. So I just assumed like everyone I worked with was going to be male, which is false. My company's like very female dominated. You know, even from, I think that first interview to me getting hired, like there was this huge gap in time. So my boss's boss, who runs our whole team, was on vacation in Italy or Spain or somewhere. And she really wanted to talk to me. So I was at A&M attending like a beef 706 course, learning how to like process beef. And they emailed me right away and they were like, hey, is there any way you could hop on a call with her? And I was like, I mean, I can. Talked to her while she was in Spain. And she kind of hinted at me getting the job. So I was like, cool. I still didn't get offered the job for another 3 weeks. And that was because there were so many people out of the office, and I kept following up with the recruiter once a week, and I'd almost given up. I said, like, they were so into me. I'm sure I was getting the job, and like they just haven't offered it to me. And I was like just on the cusp of like being like, and I'm done.
Yeah.
Silly. And then they called and offered me the job. So, you know, there's something to be said about following up, because I probably followed up with that recruiter once a week for 3 weeks, or, you know, maybe twice a week for 3 weeks, just to be like, hey, have you heard anything? Do you know where they're at?
Yeah.
That doesn't add, like, I love working with the company I work with right now. Like, I'm working with smart people. But it's funny how like those experiences kind of shape like how you see the company and how you see the job and all the things. So every job I've ever, like every real career job I've ever had, like the intro to it has never been great. Even when I think back to high school, when I think back to college, I worked for a small rural agency that I loved working for. The process to get hired there was and it was small. There's just like 4 of us, took a few weeks. And it's so funny because you think, I'm going to apply for this job. They're going to interview me. They're going to interview everybody, you know, in a week. And I'm going to get offered the job or not offer the job in like 2 weeks. You think it's going to be like this really quick, tight process. And it's not.
No, it's so true. I understand what people are like, what's taken so long? Either I am their person or I'm not their person. There is a lot going on behind the scenes. Everything from them wanting to make absolutely sure that you're the right person, and in some cases they can't be absolutely sure unless they, you know, try to interview other people. In some cases, maybe they're trying to develop some internal processes so that when you do come in, you hit the ground running, because they have to be ready for you. Once they make that offer, they're kind of committed. But I think there's a lot in there. And I mean, obviously the follow-up stuff was so critical for you. And I think probably the fact that you followed up 5 times for an internship and then got it, like, probably trained you to do really well. Because I think a lot of people don't follow up. I mean, they assume that they haven't heard anything, and no news is not good news in this case, and they just like let it fade away. But then also, I think something you kind of skimmed over that's really important for people out there is that you weren't afraid to lead with value. I specifically remember the first time you and I interacted. You had sent me a snap to the AgGrad Snapchat that said, hey, look, there's this thing called Bitly where you don't have to list this really, really long URL. And I'm just like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty cool. And so I remember that when we connected later, and then it led into you working for AgGrad. Unfortunately, we didn't have a full-time role, but you working as a freelancer for AgGrad, you know, I remember that because you're out there leading with value. And same thing, I'm sure that's how a recruiter found you on LinkedIn. I get people ask me all the time, like, what can I do? I'm applying for jobs and not getting any of them. I'm like, you've got LinkedIn. All the recruiters like me are spending all of our time on LinkedIn. If you can make yourself searchable and make yourself known by sharing relevant content, like, you will start ending up on the radar. And I think that's something that you did really well.
Yeah. And I think there's a few tips right there too that can be added. So when I got on my very first call and I work in ag communications. So like, I'm already a communicator. I have a website. That's not common for everybody. If you're in ag business, you're probably not going to have a website. But you should have a LinkedIn, whether you're an agronomist or whatever. you need to have some kind of presence on LinkedIn or whatever professional, like I know some people have forums and stuff, like then you need to be talking on those forums, right? But something I did on LinkedIn, and I still have it this way, is I have myself marked as a agricultural and food marketing professional. So I don't have it specific to my title, so that when people are searching like agriculture or food, like I'm going to pop up. And I share stuff on LinkedIn all the time. I comment on people's stuff. Like if you're not on there, then you need to be on there. Or, you know, even like engaging, you know, I feel like there have been opportunities that they didn't quite fit, but I like followed up with them and was like, hey, thanks for like at least talking to me about it or being willing to have coffee with me or whatever. Like in the future, if you ever have any openings, I'd love for you to, or have more work or whatever it is, I'd love for you to keep me in mind. And like that leaves a really good taste in people's mouths.
Yep.
I got a question the other day where it was like, I have the Facebook group Salty Tribe, and you're in there, and we got a question the other day that was like, you know, a recent grad who had teachers who had said that they were so willing to help, but hadn't given her letters of refuge, emailed, and she had maybe called, and she'd only done that once. And I'm like, oh no, man, like I was a graduate assistant, and like someone asking me for stuff like that. I remember someone on LinkedIn asking me for me to write them like a little recommendation about how they were as a student. And he followed up with me 3 times, and I finally did it, you know, and it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. It was just because I was busy, and like I had to sit down and like put my brain in that space to be able to write it. So having that experience early on made me realize like, it's not that your professors don't want to write, like they didn't lie to you, you know, they do like you. It's that they're going to have to sit down and put themselves in the right space to get that written. The best thing you can do if you need something like that, I was like, you need to provide them with some bullet points so they can literally copy and paste them and be like, she worked on this project. She's been in ag this long. She volunteers here. So they don't have to like sit and talk to you about it. They can just literally go and pull those things off your little bulleted list and then make your letter. It makes writing a letter of reference so much easier. And I think I did that when I was trying to get scholarships. I'd send my professors a little bit about me and my resume and be like, hey, could you write me a letter of reference for this scholarship? And like that was the easiest way to do it, you know.
Yep.
Little things like that just make whatever you're asking easier is so helpful.
Make that desired outcome really easy for sure. I want to get to a couple of the questions in the comments here. First of all, Patrick Murphy. Patrick, welcome. He's asking, is this a general discussion on agriculture or jobs or more specific? Today, Patrick, we're talking about the job search itself. So everything from how to apply for jobs all the way through to how to negotiate a salary. But weekly, we're here with a different topic every week. But let's go to a question for you, Hannah. Let's see. We have Sharon McIlvaney Miller.
That's my
mom. Mama Miller, do you recommend relocating to land the job you want or need?
I feel like she's asking that because I work remotely. So here's the thing. I think if I had a friend that was going through a job search and they were really tied to living in Texas, and, you know, after 4 months of job searching and not being offered a job, I was like, you need to start looking outside of Texas. Like, even if it's for a year or two to get that experience. Now, if you work in an industry, like how I feel about myself is I work in a space in AgCom that I could always come back and work for myself. I could build websites. I could do social media. I could do consulting. I have lots of things I can do. But if you're someone who has a specific skill set, you're an agronomist, or, you know, maybe you're an ag econ person, like, you know, those types of things, you might have to go somewhere. But if you will just go and like, you know, put in the year or two of work and then try to relocate, like I think that can set you up for some serious success rather than going and doing something that isn't fulfilling you. So like, you know, people who go and they go back to waitressing or they go back to whatever because they can't find that job. It's like, well, wouldn't you rather go get that experience somewhere else for at least a year? A year is really not that long, especially as you get older. I mean, it's not. A year or two is not that long to get experience and then come back and try to get your dream job somewhere, or maybe you won't hate the place that you move.
Right.
Now for me, where I'm at, I have to think about how many years down the road I am, 7-10 years marketing now. So I've been doing this since I was an undergrad working for a small agency. I wouldn't relocate for a job at this point. I bought a house in my hometown, and it's close to my family. I like being by the beach. That's not necessarily my priority. Now, if it came down to, can I pay my bills? Yeah, 100%. I have to move. But I think that I would do okay without relocating. And so it just really depends on your values. And I think the other thing is, there are a lot of people who feel like they want a remote job because like maybe their spouse is working somewhere. Especially like in ag, it's so common for couples to have to move somewhere because their husband or their wife is a crop consultant or something, and there's no big cities or big things around. They're like, oh, I have to work remotely. Well, you don't necessarily have to have a job to work remotely. What are those skills and offer at a remote distance to other people? Is it traveling to do photography? Is it doing social media for someone? Is it being a virtual personal assistant where you answer emails for somebody? Like with the digital world, because I'm all about being online and having the freedom to live wherever you want. There are so many opportunities. You just have to look for them, because some people don't know that you can even be a digital or a virtual assistant via online. Like I have friends that hire those left and right just to like sift their emails and do general responses, and that's something you can do at a distance. So that was a long way to answer that question.
Well, no, I think especially the part, where you said, look, you were willing to go do what it took to build some career equity so that you had some bargaining chips on the table. Being based where you want to be based can be a bargaining chip for the company, but for you, you need to have a bargaining chip in return. And maybe in your case, for you had some great experience and you had to go elsewhere to go get that. And plus, I'm sure it makes mom very happy that you're able to take that professionalism and be based very close. Let's go to another question here. And I'm sorry, Rachel, I didn't see this question. The first question we actually had was from Rachel McNamara. And she is asking, what's your advice for new grads that still don't have a job after graduation? So we're now at this time where you've probably graduated just recently, but still don't have a job. It seems like the hiring, at least in her area, has slowed down a bit, which is a little bit discouraging.
Yeah. So something I would say is, did you take internships while you were an undergrad? Because that could be affecting you. Like, did you have some experience? And if you haven't, then maybe think about taking an internship. A lot of internships nowadays are paid. It's not like you're having to work for free. But that is one way to just get your foot in the door somewhere, especially if you're already graduated and you take like a summer internship somewhere, then they automatically can hire you. It leads right into that. Or maybe they can't hire you, but then you have 3 months of experience and they're going to be most of the companies you go to work for are going to be plugged in with other places. So maybe they don't have the resources to offer you a job, but they know of somewhere else. And now you can say that you have experience and you have references. And, if you take an internship, do a kick-ass job, do a really great job so that then when you are looking for a job, especially if you're you didn't say if you're in, or if that means like area of industry, I'm not quite sure. But, there's power to building that network. And I think by taking an internship, that's an easy way to build that network. Now, if that's not an option, then I would start emailing people that are in the industry or the company you want to work with, and don't ask them for jobs. Ask them to go meet you for coffee. Just say, hey, can I buy you a coffee? I'd love to have 30 minutes of your time just to talk. I'm a young person that just graduated. I'm trying to work in your industry. And I just need some advice. Like, I just need some life tips. And, not only is that they can see now that you've taken that initiative, but also you're about to build a connection and build your network. And hopefully, they can help you have advice. And you never know. They might say, oh, well, I went and had to do this for 3 years before I can move over here. That's insights you're not going to get unless you go talk to someone. So I'd say get an internship if you can. And if not, just try to really work on building your network, either through asking people to go get coffee or, on LinkedIn or on these Facebook groups. So that's what
I look at that stuff as like momentum. So you're trying to go from zero, you're graduated, not sure what you want to do with the rest of your life, all the way to 60, which is like, ideally the job of your dreams. And so it's really hard to get that to go just from a standstill to that really fast pace. And so those are some great tips that Hannah just mentioned about how you can start to make baby steps to build that momentum. In Hannah's case, like I mentioned earlier, she started figuring out, who can I add value to? Who can I just send like something for free without asking anything in return, and just throw some value out there and have faith that it'll come back to me? Or, maybe it's like, hey, I really want a full-time job, but an internship is here, and that's momentum. Those are ways that you can start building up to exactly where you want to be without needing to make that leap, because I know how it feels. In fact, I graduated without a job. I started interviewing, and I worked for a contractor in College Station, Texas, because that's where my now wife was going to school, and just trying to figure it out. And it's tough, and it does feel like at least for me, it felt like I kind of missed the boat. But the truth is, there is a lot of ways that you can take it upon yourself to start building that momentum with baby steps. And Hannah just mentioned a few really, really good ones. Cool. I love this question stuff. Thanks for the questions, guys. Keep it coming here. We've got, let's see here. Oh, Alissa Smith. This is kind of a wide open one, but we can take this wherever we want to go. Alissa is asking, what jobs would you suggest to an ag business person who doesn't have a CDL?
Ooh, man, I don't know. I'm not in ag business, so I would probably, I guess I am in ag business, but I'd probably narrow it down on like what specific entity in ag business you want to work in. So like I work in ag com, or maybe you want to work in, I don't know, is grain merchandising considered ag business?
Yeah, for sure.
I would kind of narrow it down to like what those topics are, or like what those areas of interest are. And then because no CDL, I would think that you should need I guess you would need a CDL if you wanted to be like a farmhand. But if that's not your goal, or maybe that is your goal, maybe you do want to work like on the farm, same thing probably as before, just sit and work on those relationships. The other thing with ag business, I feel like there are a lot of like networking events, whether they're virtual or in real life, because that could be going to a farm bureau meeting, that could be going to, your local, like what's AFA, like all of these ag, never underestimate like your ag connections, whether that's going to Dairy Queen at 7 a.m. in the morning to sit with all the old farmers and drink coffee, or it's going to the local farm bureau meeting. Like no matter where you go, building that network and just even seeing what your options are is probably going to be a solid start.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Alissa, this is a shameless plug, but on aggrad.com, we have an ebook that lists over 300 different careers in agriculture. Many of those are very applicable to ag business. And so I think it will blow your mind how many different directions you can go. There's a resources tab on AgGrad. So if you go there and you want to check it out, it's completely free. We'd be glad to send that to you. We've got a couple more comments in here. Kimberly Bowling Jolly. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, Kimberly, but she mentioned that coffee is so safe. She loved that idea. And she says you help her company out very often. So
I have. I've done some work for that.
Awesome. Well, cool. We are running short on time, but one thing I did want to get in a little bit before we end, because I get so many questions about is salary negotiation. I would just love to hear kind of generally your thoughts on that, because it can be really awkward and intimidating. And you're like, you finally get that job and you're so excited because you got it. And then, now there's this awkward time of like, well, I got the job I want, but I would really like, X, Y, and Z. So what tips could you share regarding salary negotiation? So
my first one would be, with your very first job, you need to sit down and create a budget of everything that you're going to have to pay for, because that was really eye-opening for me. You need to look into the city that you're going to try to live in, because I moved from College Station, Texas to Austin, Texas, and the cost of living was way higher in Austin than it was in College Station. And not just cost of living, but just like cost of doing things in general. Like I went from a college town where there was lots of free events, lots of free things to do, to being in a big city. And there are free things to do in Austin, but I would think about everything. I would think about rent, gas, groceries. And if you're moving into a city, look at what those things cost, because they cost a little bit more in the city. My grocery not from College Station. No. My grocery bill was more expensive in Austin. Groceries were just literally more expensive in the city. So just think about those things. Insurance, if you're going to have to start paying your student loans back, all of those things, because that should be, and then go and, because I'm not good at math, go on to one of these free tax calculators and figure out how much tax is going to be taken out of your paycheck, and even put that in there, because you don't think about that, right? Like that could be an easy $200 to $500, whatever it might be, out of your paycheck every month. And then you're not going to have that discretionary money to spend. So when I lived in Austin, it was almost hard with my very first job to make ends meet, which was crazy to me, because I was all of a sudden making all this money, but then I was living in a city that just cost me so much more to live in. And I had a new car payment because my car had died my senior year of college, and all of these things, right? So that's where I would start. I would start and know, especially if you're straight out of college, I would know what that number is. And then I would probably jump a few $1,000s. And by a few, I mean like 3 to 5. And really know, like, look up. It's so hard in ag because I feel like we don't have a whole lot of resources for pay. Something that we openly talk about, but there are resources out there. Like we talked about PayScale and then Glassdoor. And so if you can find something similar, because you definitely don't want to undershoot yourself either. Because if you go into someone and say, oh, I need $30,000, and they're used to paying people $45,000, they're either going to be like, dang, we're getting her cheap, or they're going to be like, she must not have all the skills we need. They're going to think there's something weird about you asking that. Granted, you are a fresh grad, and I think it's a little unfair for companies to do that to fresh graduates. Now, that was a really big right out of college. I negotiated my salary. So I sat down and they made me an offer, and it was under my number. And so I came back and I said, I went over my number a few $1,000s, or I think like $2,000, and said, hey, this is the number I was more hoping to see. And then we negotiated down to like almost my exact number that I needed to live, basically. And so that's how it happened my first time. And at first, it was a little weird because at first I was working with the HR person via email. And then one of the founding partners called me and negotiated with me the rest of the way. So you have to be prepared for that. And I broke it down for him. I said, this is why I need this much money. I've done a budget. I know how much rent costs, my student loans, groceries. Like, this is what I need to live. And so then it was easier to have that conversation because I tied it back to like, this is really what I need to live in Austin. So it was a little bit different because that company had a lot of employees in a different state. And so they weren't quite they weren't used to having to adjust for the big city cost of living. And so we did that. Now this time around was a completely different experience because I'd been working for myself. And so that gap was very different, right? Like I wasn't getting a solid income every month. Like I don't have pay stubs. Right. I can do a profit and loss statement, I guess. But I had this recruiter ask, what did you make at your last job? And I said, yeah, that's really not relevant because I've been working for myself for 1.5 years. Right. And I just, and she was fine with that. She was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And I said, I make a much higher hourly rate. I said, I will tell you that I don't work 8 hours a day at that hourly rate. But like I'm making more money that way. And so I said, here's the range that I would be, I just sent her a range. And I was like, here's the range that I'd be comfortable with. And because she had this like crazy number listed on the application, but they were because they had a range that they were going to work with to get the right person in. And so I sent her the range, and then they came back because I was working through her. So with her, I think she just came back with an offer, and it was where I wanted it. So I accepted it. I probably should have pushed back and said, hey, I'd really love to see this number, but I'm still really happy with like where we landed. And I was just happy, I think, too, to get the offer because we had such a long process.
Right. Yeah.
That I was like, man, this is a good offer. It'd make life a little bit easier. I'm excited about the work. I'm excited about this company. I'm the offer. So, it was a little bit, it felt almost a little bit easier, but like coming up with that number, because I'd worked for myself, was a little bit harder. But I knew what I wanted to get if I was giving up all of my freedom.
Yep.
Because you work for yourself, you have a lot of freedom. And when you work for someone else, you're tied to I'm sitting at my desk in my house. I work from 8 to 4 every day here because I work on Eastern time. And so I'm tied to this chair. I'm tied to their travel schedule or whatever. So I had to think about what giving my freedom up meant too. So yeah, like that was my story. I'm trying to think if there are any tips.
Well, I can add a couple just from listening to you. I mean, definitely the knowing what you want. I think that's the biggest thing. And that can be hard to do, especially starting out. You can, if you have a recruiter that you can trust, definitely call them and ask their thoughts. I'm certainly willing to have that conversation with you if you'd like to utilize the AgGrad resource for that. But knowing what you want is big. And what I find is that some people get the tone wrong when they're negotiating. The tone should be, I really want this to work out, but it's got to work out in a way that works for everybody. And it can be hard to kind of nail that tone. Sometimes people think they're playing poker, right? And they just like go cold. And that's going to make it all the more difficult for things to work out. But then the other thing related to tone is kind of timing, especially if you're doing this via email. You want to be pretty timely with your responses to things. Sometimes people think, well, maybe I'll just draw this out and either they'll make a decision that I want them to make or another offer will come along. And not only does that usually kill the deal, but it also can kind of burn the bridge relationship wise too. So you want to have the positive collaborative tone and you want the timing to have a really kind of realistic cadence. So you're not waiting a week to respond to an email and that sort of thing. But definitely knowing what you want can be probably the biggest thing. And then if you get what you want, or especially if you say, hey, Mr. Employer, this is what I want, or Mrs. Employer, this is what I want, and they give it to you, you've kind of committed to taking it. And I have seen bridges get burned where they say, I really want XYZ number. And the employer says, okay, I want you to come work for us, so I'll give it to you. And they say, well, let me think about it. And that doesn't ever go over very well either.
No. And I would say too, like, I was just thinking, I turned down a job that couldn't meet my number. So there was a couple of things. It was a marketing agency, and I knew what my number was because I had been working at my previous job, and I interviewed while I was still there because they were kind of trying to steal me. I went to them, and I like, first off, it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. I drove all the way up there to interview. It was like a 5 or 6 hour drive. Interviewed with them. They didn't offer to like pay for any of my gas or like offered lodging. So that already, I was just like, man, that's like kind of weird. Because anytime I've ever been, like, I had been flown out for interviews before, and they pay for all of it. They pay for your flight and your hotel and everything.
Usually.
And so, yeah, it's very common practice. And so we go through this whole interview. I meet everybody on the team. They all like me. They think that I'm going to be a great fit, but then they don't offer me the job. So I get home and they send me an email and they're like, hey, what salary are you looking for? And so I was like, I'm pretty firm. Like I was like, this is what I'm looking for. And I think I sent them a specific number, and they sent me back a number that was much lower. And so I went back to them and I was like, hey, like, I'll be honest, like, this is my bottom number. Like if you can't, this is what you have to offer me to get me a job, to get me to come work there. And they were also giving me the job, but putting me on like contract, I guess. Like, they weren't hiring me full time. Mm-hmm. They were gonna like give me 6 months to see if it worked out, but then they were making me move there. And I'm like, man, I'm not gonna move to this place and then you 6 months down the line be like, JK, this isn't working out, and I didn't have all the full benefits. And so like, those are things you've taken into consideration, but they came back and they still said, we can't, and this time the CEO of the company came back and was like, we can't offer you that. And they tried to make it right. She was like, I'll offer you an extra week of vacation, and I'll offer you like it was like a 2 or 3 educational experiences. But when it came down to it, like, I had my number, and I was like, I know what my number is to survive. And not just survive, because like, that's what I was doing in Austin. I was just surviving. I didn't want to just get by. I wanted to have a little bit of money to like put into savings or to travel, like just a little bit. And so I knew what that number was, and I walked away from that job. And even though they came back, and some people that might've been worth it, the extra week of vacation, the extra educational opportunities, like for some people that would be worth it, but they had put this weird taste in my mouth about not offering to pay for my mileage. And then like, not like offering me the job, but like after I left and via email. And I think I was kind of reading into like what the company culture was like there. And I was like, man, I don't know that that's an organization I want to be a part of. So you have to be ready to walk too. I mean, and that can be hard right out of college to be like, man, they're offering me $27,000 and I have a college degree. I don't know if that's worth it for me to live in, to live wherever it might be. So knowing what you're really, I think it really always comes back to knowing what that number is and like having a firm stance, because, when I sent back that, hey, this is my number, they tried to come back and be like, well, we can offer you these things. And it still wasn't right to me. So
yeah, be willing to walk away if it's not right. You don't have to say yes to every opportunity that ever comes along. That's for sure. Well, Hannah, I can't believe we've already gone like over 40 minutes. This is great. Let's Abigail Bagley wanted to say hi, so we'll throw her up there. And she said, "Wow, Hannah." So, how can we, those of us watching, those of us tuning in on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, how can we follow along with Hannah Mo Miller and support you here going forward?
Yeah, so I'm just about on everything, Instagram, Twitter, all the things as Hannah with an H, Mo Miller, Momiler. I have a website that's also that. It's being revamped right now, so don't go there right now. But yeah, you can follow me on the gram and on Twitter. I'm always happy to answer questions. I love being, and I even have a little small Facebook group. While I try to protect my time and only spend so much time in there or so much time when it comes to like mentoring or helping, like I do set time aside for that in my week to week. So always happy to answer questions, especially AgCom or negotiating salary questions, because that is nerve-wracking and hard. But yeah, always around.
You're the best, Hannah. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for all of you who joined us live and asked questions. This is fun. Come back every week. We're here usually late in the day on Wednesday. We'll go live with a new topic and a new guest, and we'll have to bring Hannah back on because it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com. That's AGGRAD to join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.